Petya Koeva-Brooks is Deputy Director of Research at the International Monetary Fund.
The global economy has been surprisingly resilient, and we have upgraded our forecast by 0.2 this year. Growth is holding steady, as you mentioned, at 3.2, and inflation is expected again to come down. So all of that is the good news, but there are a lot of risks ahead. And also looking into the medium term, we're expecting growth to be around 3.1, which is significantly lower than the historical average of 3.8.
So you mentioned risks ahead. The geopolitical situation, obviously one threat to growth. What other challenges do you see?
Absolutely. Indeed, the escalation of geopolitical risks is one which could increase oil prices and lead to higher shipping costs, which would mean that the impact on inflation would be adverse, and it could delay the easing of monetary policy. But there are other risks as well. We could see inflation staying stickier than what we are currently expecting in some countries. There could also be adverse outcomes in China. All of that said, there are, of course, risks on the upside as well, which we highlight in our report.
Well, let's talk about China. How important is China's growth for the health of the global economy?
Well, China is the second largest economy, and even though it is slowing, we're expecting growth this year to be 4.6. It is still, these growth rates are still significantly higher than those in advanced economies. So it will still remain an important source of growth for the global economy. That said, we just overnight saw some numbers for the first quarter, which surprised on the upside. So we could be revisiting our forecast.
Well, let's talk about the world's biggest economy then, the United States, which has been performing well, of course. But the IMF thinks the way it's achieved that could cause trouble for the global economy.
Indeed, the upside surprises in the U.S. economy has been the main reason for our forecast upgrade. Now, that resilience and strong growth has come both because of supply factors, in particular the strong increase in labor input, including through immigration, as well as strong productivity growth. But there is another aspect of this growth which is coming from demand pressures, and it's those demand pressures that could also put upward, push up inflation, which is why we're calling for a gradual and cautious approach in cutting rates going forward, again, to be able to solve the inflation problem.
So there are hopefully some bright spots to look at and potential drivers for growth. What do you think they're going to be?
Well, we have seen a lot of strength again on the supply side in the growth in the global economy, and this is not just the U.S. It's also in a number of emerging markets. The scarring from the pandemic, it turns out it's not as large as we had previously expected, and labor force participation is coming back in many economies. Now, I would say the exception to that is the low-income countries, where our estimates of scarring are now larger than they were previously, which is why we think it's so important to be able to, for the international community, to provide support to those who need it the most.